welcome. Thanks for coming back to GGU Presents. This is our Back to the Basics webinar series. My name is Marc Singer. I'm the Dean for the School of Undergraduate Studies at Golden Gate University. And it is my pleasure to welcome today Ron Glait. We went over the pronunciation, and I think I've almost gotten that right, from the Contemporary Jewish Museum, which is our neighbor just down the street on Mission Street. Why don't I tell you a little bit about who Ron is, and I think you'll find we have a lot to talk about today. So Ron's the Museum Technology Manager and Educator at the Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco, where he shares his love of art and deep knowledge of Jewish culture and history with visitors of all ages and walks of life. Ron was born and raised in Israel, and he started there as a youth leader in the Israeli Scouts. That's just part of his interest in education. Later worked for the municipality of Shoham in Israel at the youth cultural and as a youth cultural and leisure coordinator, where he created and coordinated cultural and educational activities. He spent most of his career working for nonprofits in education and the arts. In 2017, he got his master's in education in visual literacy studies and a curator diploma from the Kibbutzim College of Education in Tel Aviv. And he's been in the US since 2018, and he lives today in San Francisco. So welcome, Ron. Really, really great to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So I've been really wanting to talk to you for a while because, first of all, we're neighbors on our street and in San Francisco. And, I've really started to think about what museums do and their role in their community is somehow similar to what universities like Golden Gate do in their community. So I'm hoping we can compare some notes, and you can just point out where I'm wrong, because I'm sure there are a lot of places. But anyway, so you are now, and I believe this is a recent title change for you. You are now the Museum Technology Manager as well as Educator at the museum. Can you tell me how did you come to be working there?
So I think at some point in my studies or in my career, working for a nonprofit in, mostly for performing arts as a producer and, working for a college for the dance department, I realized that I wanted to explore working in museums and thinking about curatorial studies as a way of telling stories in a different way, through different lenses. So I decided to do my master in visual literacy and get a curator diploma. And then I moved to the United States. I got married. My husband is Israeli American, and we moved here to be closer to our family here. And my in-laws took me one day when we just arrived here. They took me to San Francisco to show me around the city, and they took me to the Contemporary Jewish Museum. And other than the fact that the building is amazing, the architecture is like beautiful, as someone who adores architecture, I immediately fell in love with the place, the physical place. There was something about the mission or the way that the Contemporary Jewish Museum look at exhibitions, look at the stories that are told there. That was very compelling to me. And I started, and I was thinking, okay, I want a career in museums. So I started volunteering there, still, in the process of getting my green card. And eventually, once I got my green card, I was able to transition and become an educator there, and grew with responsibilities. And during this pandemic, I actually utilized my other passions for technology, graphic design, and my, technology know-hows to design virtual tours, live guided virtual tours via Zoom for schools and communities. And this engagement with technology, or engaging around art and culture and the stories of the museum through a computer, it felt like a natural transition to the realm of museum technologies. And this is how I ended up becoming the museum technology manager.
And then, as we'll talk about, I mean, your interest in your expertise in that area with technology has served you in the museum really well this past year, right? You've done some really innovative things with those tours.
Yeah, so both we did the virtual tours is a big component, and like since the beginning of COVID, already back in 2020, and up till now, we've seen over 5,000 people, students, adults, people from all walks of life, and all around the United States and also worldwide, that came virtually on a live guided tour of the museum, and that's something that never happened before. Um, we did have tours in person, but not from all around the world coming as school groups or communities coming to learn about our current exhibitions that we have right now. And in addition to that, like venturing into the realm of Facebook, and we have Sunday stories. So on selected Sundays, we put out almost like a mini documentary that is about a subject or an exhibition. And we have a lot of interaction or great views of people are tuning in and learning more through that. So even though we have been closed for the most of the pandemic, we saw virtually, we saw people, we were engaging with audiences with our public programs, also via Zoom and social media, and that was a great experience.
Wow. So in a way, you were sort of able to expand the area, the group of people you serve. It's almost ironically, I guess, right? Because they weren't just tied to San Francisco anymore. This is really a national, international group of people.
Yeah, and I think like we were both lucky to be able to offer that, in the sense that I was able to design this specifically. I'm talking about virtual tours, and market it, and and it's something that grew from from mouth to ear. It's like we didn't do like an aggressive marketing of this, but one group came on the tour, and then a person from that group wanted to take it to another group they belonged to and another club, or is a teacher and wanted to bring their students to this tour. And the other thing that we had, and we still have on display, the Levi Strauss A History of American Style exhibition, which is a remarkable story of this Jewish immigrant that came here and built this brand we all know as Levi's, and the story of blue jeans that I'm sure many of our audience members wear and have, and how through looking at this garment we can learn about the history of San Francisco, of California, of the cultural heritage of this garment in our popular culture. So I think that unique moment of having that story to tell through our lens of the Contemporary Jewish Museum and engaging with audiences all around the world made it possible to grow this audience.
Wow. So I'm glad you mentioned that Levi Strauss exhibit, because it really, to me, speaks to the something I'm really interested in talking to you about now, which is that at the same time, that exhibit is it's local, it's about San Francisco. It's also about the larger Jewish experience, in the diaspora. But then it's something that everyone can connect with, right? The blue jeans thing, which probably most of us have seen if we don't actually own a pair, right? So it gets me thinking about this idea of how does the museum see itself in relation to its community, to the Bay Area, for instance. Is it a Bay Area institution, or does it see itself as something bigger than that?
I think, like I always go back to the mission of the museum, and the first statement there is to make the diversity of Jewish experience relevant to the 21st century audience. So just by first of all, we're talking about the diversity of Jewish experience. It's not just one story, it's many different kinds of stories. And make it available to the 21st century audience means that it's not just the audience of San Francisco, not just the Jewish community of San Francisco. It is more broader story that we're trying to tell. Yeah, we do want to highlight, and we do highlight in our exhibitions, of course, the local stories um, of San Francisco, but also Bay Area. Also, this Sunday, I believe we're going to have a Sunday story about the Petaluma chicken farmers, which was an exhibition about them at the museum. Again, a story, something that has to do with like the history of the Jewish community here in California. but we also bring contemporary art of artists from different walks of life. Recently, we had in 2019, we had "Show Me as I Want to Be Seen," that explored identity, both gender identity, but also racial identity and refugee identity.
Hmm.
Through lenses of contemporary art in connection to a very unique story of a Jewish artist who was not very well known in general society, but is known in the art world. Photographer Claude Cahun and Marcel Moore. So we are able to talk to present both Jewish artists or Jewish art through contemporary lens, but also talk about contemporary issues through art and Jewish artists, but also just telling an historical story, but with contemporary sensitivity. Or, especially when we talk about the Levi Strauss exhibition, we are not, I want to say from my experience as a giving tours of that specific exhibition, we are very cognizant that we are telling a very specific story of an individual that, even though he came here running from persecution in Germany in the 19th century and was able to thrive, he was able to thrive because here in San Francisco, the fact that he was Jewish didn't hold him back. There was no discrimination against Jews coming to San Francisco. But at the same time, we do point out and highlight who were the minorities that were discriminated against. And if we talk about the Chinese Exclusion Act, for example. So we do highlight that, we do present it in our tours and also in the gallery, and in a subtle way, but it's there, and we point out to that.
Yeah, so there's a lot more context of the circumstances by which he came here and what else is going on and who else is affected in different ways. Yeah, so I actually want to shift. I probably should have started with this. So let me go back a step or two. Because I think the museum is unique in that it's a non-collecting institution, right? It doesn't have a permanent collection of its own, which something I always thought was what a museum was. So could I ask you something maybe really simple? The difference between a museum and a gallery, because that's how I would think of a gallery.
Yeah, so I think like we can think about, so galleries have a financial aspiration for the art that they have in them. They want to sell the art. A museum is not concerned about that aspect of selling art. The art is there to be collected and presented. We are in a very unique situation that we don't have a collection. We don't own art that is permanent. The only thing that is permanent is the architecture of the building, and this is what we regard as our collection. And it tells a very wonderful story. Again, there's a virtual tour and a live tour available. So I think that the difference here is the financial gain. We are an institute that is primarily to educate. We're there to invite the people in, to engage in a conversation using the art or the artifacts that we display as a prop for conversation about bigger issues. Again, Levi's story is a prompt for immigration stories,
Right.
for entrepreneurship.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So that's and to me, that's what got back to that original question that I asked about, that sense of community, who your community is, because you're prompting those conversations, you're prompting those discussions, and they happen within, well, in our case, in the context of the Bay Area, So, but of course, there's no reason to limit it to that either. So then let me ask you. You mentioned something about the finances. If I could ask you, I'm not going to ask you how much money anyone makes or anything like that, but do museums like yours or one that doesn't have a permanent collection, is there how do they think about the business model that helps them keep their doors open? And I ask that partly because at Golden Gate we have a lot of students, a lot of programs in business and management, and it's something we've been talking about quite a bit. Is what does it mean to be sustainable? What does it mean to have a business model that also serves our community?
Yeah, so I think it's very complex, especially now after because of what happened with COVID-19 and the closure, a lot of the support that we get is from revenues. So that was very limited. But, of course, the major money comes from fundraising, from donors, both private donors, but also foundations, grants, and of course some federal or state
Of course.
foundations. So so it's very hard to think about a business model. It runs as a nonprofit. So uh, I think the idea, and I want to go back to the fact that we're like operating in this pandemic. We had to think about, okay,
Yeah.
how or I don't say we, I think the museum wanted to, how can we, when this is all over, how can we come back and still be relevant and be able to open
Right.
the door? What are the steps that we need to take in order to get there? And there are, like, of course, again, there were all the PPP loans and donors that came through and continued to support the museum, even though it was closed to the public. So continue their contributions and support. And public, a lot of public, one-time donors that wanted to support us became members. A lot of membership, people that decided to become members and pay their dues to support the museum. So yeah, and we had to trim back on our personnel. We are,
Mm.
our work life has changed. Our less people are working in the organization, different capacities of work, and it's changes. At one point, I was at 40%, and then 80%, and then 100%, and then again 80%. It's like it changed all the time. So I think because us, for specific us, we started as a very small organization. We didn't start with a staff of 100 or more. We were very small staff to begin with. So it allowed us more flexibility and to maintain a little bit longer people working. And now, we are very small, even more than we were. And part of my time I work as an educator, part of my time I work as a museum technology manager. So we do what we have to do in order to adjust and be able to reopen the doors, and also thinking about a year from now, 2 years from now, to come back to where we were.
Hmm.
Or how do we come back to where we were?
Well, that makes sense. Gosh. Right. So that makes me think of a bunch of questions, and I should mention to our folks who are here right now, who are listening, if you have any questions for Ron, please post them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. It's not the chat, but the Q&A, and we will do our best to get to all of the questions. So you mentioned, so the staff has been cut back. You had varying amounts of time that you were being able to commit to the museum. So you've mentioned, and this is the thing I know best about what's been going on this past year at the Contemporary Jewish Museum, which is the virtual tours that you were really, I think, a pioneer. And I know a lot of museums have started to do this now, but as far as I know, you're either the first or among the first to have come up with that. So I'm lucky to have you on the show in particular. You really, so this is some cutting edge stuff you've been working on this year. But aside from that, what else was the museum doing? I don't mean that came out the wrong way, probably, but there must be other things that had to happen over this past year when the museum was closed to the public. So what other kinds of work, whether that's tied to the community or just to maintaining the museum itself, were folks doing this past year?
So there were many, there's the virtual world where we had, as I mentioned, the Sunday stories, and we had robust public programs, events. And one fun thing that we had is around Jewish holidays and dealing with, traditional foods. We invited chefs it was like an online cooking show of re-examining those traditional foods with different traditions. And it was live from their kitchens. So that was a wonderful way to tell us more about, the Jewish experience, the Jewish community. But also, we had different kinds of ideas of how can we support the community at this moment, the artist community in San Francisco and the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And we have now this program, Artist Studio, where we took spaces in the museum that are not, we can't use them right now because of the restrictions. So there are classrooms, and we transform them into artist studios. And we have right now 2 resident artists that work there. This is, the pandemic impacted everyone, but
Absolutely.
in the art world, artists lost their couldn't rent the studios, couldn't continue doing their work. So we, working with them to give them this space they need. And in that way, also engaging with local artists, but also they can engage with our community through public programs, through our online programs. We have a robust teen program where we, and again, this year it was virtually, but we've been doing this for several years, when we have teen interns, high school students that becomes member of staff for a short period, for a year, and they engage in learning about the museum, learning about the business side of the museum, programmatic side of how to create programs, how to facilitate programs. They themselves learn how to give a tour, and this year they learned how to give a virtual tour, an architecture virtual tour, and they did that. So we had different. We continued, like, the things that we could offer with the restrictions that we had. We kept doing. Another wonderful example is our art bash, our family art bash. So we did that 3 times last year. Every time it's like adjacent to one of the Jewish holidays. So the first one was for the high holidays, and then for Hanukkah, and then the last one was for Passover, where we created art kits and distributed them through our community partners. And we all came together on a Zoom webinar on a Sunday, and people tuned in from home, and they had the supplies at home. And we just did art workshops via Zoom, live art workshops, and we saw hundreds of children. We didn't see them, visually, but we
Right.
engaged with them via Zoom, and then they shared with us their art. We got like a lot of images and photographs and comments of children engaging with materials, creating art. So yeah, different kind of activities and engaging with the community.
Wow. So there's actually kind of a lot. I mean, but once now that the museum's open, you're going to stop doing all that, right? I mean, you're going to be back to
No,
business.
actually, that's not where we're headed. As we mentioned in the beginning, the fact that it's opened up to people outside of the Bay Area, people outside of California, to be able to engage with us virtually. And also thinking about, in the past year, we've been working, we have an Aridia team with anti-racism, equity, diversity, and a team that works to get to make the organization itself. So working in the aftermath of George Floyd and everything that happened and the recent election. So thinking, how can we serve the community that cannot travel to the museum, that don't have the access they need to engage in that moment. So and through the virtual world, through things as simple as Facebook or a Zoom tour, communities that can't, teachers that can't afford hire a bus and bring their students to engage, in the museum. So thinking that this can stay, it's not going to go away. It's just going to add to our tool belt. What can we offer?
That's great. That's right. So this leads me to a couple of questions that folks have posted while we've been talking. One is, this will sound like we set it up this way, but where do people sign up for these things? So the art bash, for instance, is one question. How or the exhibits? Somebody asked about where can they go to see the Levi Strauss exhibit? Can I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't ask you to prepare.
No, that's fine. So everything is through our website. So you can go to the thiscjm.org and sign up for a newsletter. So there's the family newsletter if you want to get news when the Art Bash is coming, but it also goes out to our general newsletter. It's not just for members. It is open to the public. And when we come out with it, we put it out on our website, we put it out through our newsletter, through our community partners. Most of them are, of course, Jewish organizations around the Bay Area, Jewish day schools, and libraries. So yeah, there are a lot of ways to get that information. Of course, becoming a member makes the information easier because it's pushed to you every time that something is going on. You get that opportunity. And also for the virtual tours, if you go out again on our website, you can go to the module that says virtual tours, and you can sign up for a virtual tour. But that is for groups. Like if you have a group that you want to bring on a virtual tour, that is signed up for that. And right now, as you mentioned, the museum is open to the public. We are not able to do in-person tours, but people can come in and enjoy Levi Strauss, also enjoy Zohar Studios, which is an amazing photography exhibition. Yeah.
So there's quite a lot going on there then. So then another question that somebody posted, Marianne Cook, perhaps you know Marianne, has asked, what now that we're starting to come back, what besides the tours that are not open, live tours, what will you do differently as a result of COVID when you can come back? Like, I guess there's really two sides of that. What can't you do yet? But then also, what new things are you thinking about?
So we cannot have in-person tours yet. Some of it has to do with regulation, but some of it has to do with, frankly, people level of comfort of standing in close proximity with other people and engaging in a conversation. So that will take time, I'm sure, even once we are allowed to congregate again. I think it will take time. But I think part of the reason that I started this position of museum technology manager is looking and thinking, how can technology serve us when we step into even coming back into the actual building, to the museum? So thinking about, and that's part of my wish, dreams, that people will be able to use, first of all, their personal technology to engage better with what we offer, in terms of interpretation sometimes, or, for most cases, we only have English labels on the wall. And if someone needs translation, there might be a way to accommodate that, or different accessibility issues of, vision, or that you can translate something that is written into audio. So that one case, but also like how to make the interaction itself with what we are showing more interactive, in a way that doesn't require to touch something, but you can interact with interacting thing using technology. So there are many things to think about, and we're not there yet, but I think those are things that would change. But also, I think themes of exhibitions, we are thinking about, again, the broader story that we can tell about what's going on right now. One of the things is that we are the Contemporary Jewish Museum. We are not a historical museum of the Jewish diaspora of San Francisco or a Holocaust memorial. So, we are living in this very, very unique moment in history. And how do we interpret exhibitions through our tours and through our website to visitors coming in? What are the subjects that we're going to deal with in the upcoming years? Those are the discussions that are happening right now.
That's so interesting that you think that when you talk about the current, contemporary experience that people are having, because most of what people have been experiencing this past year is through technology, the screens of various types. But what I think you're talking about is not just this way that we're all sort of distanced from one another through our technology, but that technology, in the way you're talking about it, is a way that we're somehow keeping our community together and promoting community. Does that make sense? Maybe that's an outdated way of thinking about technology, but most of the time people think of it as something that distances us from the so-called real thing.
Yeah. So I, I think that's a great debate that I think museums are having right now. Some museums have decided that they are not going to continue with virtual because it's important for them to bring the people to the museum and see things for live. And there is value in that, and it's undeniable that nothing will replace the immediate interaction that you have with the actual piece, either that will be an art piece or historical artifact. Uh, but thinking again about accessibility, it's not something that everybody can afford or can do, and why why not utilize what we saw possible in COVID, and that's technology, in order to engage with people that cannot come to the museum, and offer that as a supplement to seeing the thing in person. But also, once you come into the museum, you're not confined to just what you see in front of you. You can immediately access more information. Just by scanning a barcode, you can get a link to another documentary movie that tells the backstory of what you're seeing. And then we're also talking about, if we're talking about education, different modalities of interacting. So some people can read a text, but some people doesn't. For them to read a text, it's hard or doesn't communicate information. But if they see it in a or listen to it or see it in a documentary, uh, they get the information better. So there are a lot of ways to think about how can we involve or use technology to enhance the experience, not to replace the experience.
Interesting. Well, that gets me to this question. I think you and I have talked about a little bit. I may have already mentioned it just now, um, which is this question of getting back to that question of community. Can technology sort of somehow stand in for a sense of community, or even enhance our sense of community? I don't know if you think of it this way or if the museum does officially, but
Listen, I can say personally, for me, technology had to stand in this
yeah,
in a way of community, because being here, removed from my family and friends in Israel, so technology was and not being able to travel there. So
right.
technology was the only sense of community that I had with my community there. Uh, you know, uh, Birthdays and special occasions and sad occasions. So yeah, I think that the way we see community has shifted, has changed. Community is not just the people that we spend time with physically. There's a way for us to engage with community uh, thanks to technology in a different way. Now, of course, there are a lot of problems with that, a lot of issues with those kinds of communities, and what happens when they're being abused. Uh, Hopefully, Congress will put some regulations on that. That's my personal view.
Mm,
That you know, it shouldn't be open or used, to harm and hurt individuals in our society.
of course.
But it could be a tool. It could be a good tool for growth and communications.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's great. So I've gotten a couple more questions from folks here, which I think are really good. Um, so one question is, what about the other museums in the area? Are you all connected somehow? I mean, do you all work together on these kinds of projects, or see your roles in the same way?
So we are connected and not connected. We're connected in the sense that I think during this pandemic, a lot of uh, interest groups sprung.
Hmm.
Educators, museum educators in the Bay Area come together and discuss different approaches, different issues. I was fortunate, privileged to present my virtual tours, or how I constructed my virtual tours, to this group of Bay Area museum professionals. museum educators, but also I did the same for museum educators in Israel in a mini conference with them. So there are, I think that maybe because of the pandemic, the relationships of sharing information and open to having a discussion about the things that are happening, both with the profession itself, but also, how the things that are happening outside of the institutes are influencing the work that we're doing. I think it definitely brought institutes closer. Having said that, we don't coordinate any. There's
Right.
no, as far as I know, there's no like specific coordination. I want to say that in the beginning of the pandemic, when we had to, there was a coordinated effort to include museums as to get the benefits of the PPP and and get relief.
Oh, that makes
kind of
sense. Yeah.
pandemic. But
And universities did something similar too, sort
Mhm.
of working together to try to figure out what to do next. So
Yeah.
it's not a conspiracy. It's just it made sense. Um, so somebody asked just now in response to your describing the virtual tour. Can you actually talk about, unless it's proprietary, like how the virtual tour works? I mean, is there a videographer? Would you mind describing
Oh,
what that
so
looks like?
yes, I think it's important to understand. So when I say virtual tour, I don't mean that I stand in the gallery with a camera, because for the most part of the pandemic, the galleries were closed. We're not allowed to be inside the museum ourselves. So what I did, I created basically it's a PowerPoint presentation, and the way I constructed the images is a combination of both uh, images of the installation from the gallery, but then you can zoom in on one object on the wall, and it becomes bigger, and you can see more information, more details.
Hmm.
And it's an invitation to have a conversation. All the tours are conducted in the inquiry-based technique of seeing something, exploring what do we see, what do we notice, and then what kind of a conversation that sparks. So that's the difference between a live guided tour, a virtual live guided tour, is the fact that I facilitate that kind of conversation and also share information and show those images. And comparing it to a virtual tour that you can go, there are a lot of institutes that you can go, and there is like a Google 360 camera that you can like step inside the gallery and see the different objects and maybe read something on the wall, but you do it by yourself, and it's not a live experience with someone facilitating it.
I see. Okay, that helps. That makes a lot of sense. So another question I have here from folks has to do with schools, and which makes sense because we're a school, and I should have probably asked you this from the beginning. But are there ways that you currently interact with schools, and not just universities, but K through 12 or whatever? Or are there ways that we should start thinking about interacting with one another differently as a result of this year?
Yeah, so I think that like our institute, education, was at the forefront of this institute from the beginning. So education was, and the connection to school groups was before the pandemic. I was fortunate to be the tour coordinator before the pandemic, and we saw many students come and visit the galleries, visit our exhibitions. We have a program that they come see an exhibition, and then they do an art workshop at the museum, interpreting or using some of the techniques they discovered in the gallery. So our school programs was robust before the pandemic, and the connection with schools. We have schools all around the Bay Area that come to us year after year after year. Teachers that choose to come to our museum, even in public schools, not specifically Jewish schools. The greater community. And I think that what we did during the pandemic is actually building on those personal relationships and offering, reaching out to teachers, saying, "Oh, I know," and this is what I did in the beginning of the pandemic. I reached out to teachers that already have booked a tour for their class to come and see the exhibition, but because of the closure that was canceled, And I said, okay, you know what? We have this virtual option now available. Are you interested? And most of them came with yes, definitely. And and then one teacher came and had that experience, and then offered it to their colleague, or the teacher in the same age group across the room, and they came with their class, and then it grew and grew. So um, now we are very well known around the Bay Area in schools for the virtual tours, and after finishing the school year of 2019-2020, uh, we started again marketing again, offering again the virtual tours, and we see both the teachers that already came on the virtual tour bringing back their students, either for the new students for the same tour, or the same students for a different experience, but also the new teachers coming, hearing about this possibility, and coming and joining that. So that's great.
Mm. So I wonder how our university could somehow work with you, sending our students there, or can they do research there, for instance? Is that a possibility?
um, Depends on the research, I
Yeah.
guess.
Right.
We have
Yeah,
a
I didn't
very
ask that
nice,
question well. Yeah.
yeah, we have a nice library with the Diller Library, which is has literature both about the exhibitions, Jewish community, Jewish heritage, the museum. So if someone is interested in researching that, it's possible. But yeah, I think it depends on like what is the question that students want to ask, and
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, I'm getting a couple questions from one person who I'm just going to connect you with later to have you talk. But I think as we're talking, some of our folks are just sort of getting inspired by some of the ideas you're bringing up, and they're thinking, oh, can we work together? Can we design activities? And I think that would be great, and I'm going to connect you with folks who are interested in doing that if you don't mind.
Mhm.
That would be terrific. So we just have a moment or two left, I suppose. So I'm wondering what's going on at the museum coming up the next few months. What can we expect? Should we be sending people down there to go right
Yes,
away?
so I would recommend to come and catch the last, it's been there for over a year, but it wasn't open to the public, and we're now
Yeah.
reaching the end of Levi Strauss. Again, it is a remarkable exhibition, and I'm sure that anyone can find something there out of the 250 items that we have on display, something that you can relate to. But also we have a very riveting photography exhibition, Zor Studio. It's a very interesting story, using 19th century art style photography to tell different kinds of stories. So I would recommend people to check that out. And hopefully we'll be announcing soon. It's not official yet, but we are going to have some sort of our own interpretation of the Leonard Cohen experience. So there was an exhibit that was supposed to come to us, the Leonard Cohen exhibition, A Crack in Everything, from Canada, originated in Canada. But because of the pandemic, things have changed. A lot of things couldn't be displayed because of restrictions, health code restrictions. So we created something else building on that. And again, check our website. An announcement will come out hopefully by the end of this week or next week with the
Oh,
dates for that. But this is coming in 2021 still.
Oh, that's really exciting. I really want to thank you for taking the time here. Of course, folks are asking questions now as I'm wrapping up things, but uh, this is really been great. I'll send you all those questions, and we can post answers to those when we post this on YouTube, which folks should know is what's going to happen in the next few days. So Ron Glait from the Contemporary Jewish Museum, the museum technology manager and educator. I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and for what you're going to do in the future when I connect you to our faculty who are really interested in working with you. As I said at the beginning, we have been thinking a lot about what our role is in the community,
Mhm.
how to engage with folks, and clearly from the work you're doing, both virtual and now back in the building again, that's something you've been thinking a lot about as well. And seems like there's a connection there.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk more about the things that we're doing in the museum. And again, thinking about, how neighboring buildings can start talking and having some sort of an engagement together. That would be awesome.
Yeah, we're 2 blocks away. We're just
Yeah,
down the street.
yeah, I'm familiar. I've walked by your building and in your building before.
Great, great. Ron, thanks again.
Thank you.
And so we're going to continue on with this series on the intersection of art and business, really, with GGU. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a couple of other sessions. We'll post information to that on our GGU Presents page on our website. So thanks all of you very much for coming, and we'll see you again soon.